This is called The Rise of Throuples in Gen Z Media. It's an interesting topic. For those of you who don't know, I have for a significant amount of my dating life been either poly or open. This is something that's very much closing now, obviously, as I'm with my wife. So I have some different theories on why, and I will say that I'm happier now that my relationship is closed. My biggest theory is I think that for some reason, people are using like open relationships and whatnot as a way, like they're like friends, like it's friends now. People are like don't have regular friends anymore. It's all like friends with benefits in some capacity. They're confusing that like intimacy that you're supposed to have with like a singular person, with having it with multiple people. Here's the thing: there are some people that might be able to make it work. Most of you can't. It's not good. I'll tell you that the availability, it hurts your regular relationship because you're spending time and energy and effort on somebody who is not your actual partner. It's not going to make you feel fulfilled. I'm telling you right now, it's something that I do feel fulfilled with, just being with my wife. I have more time to focus on work. I know that sounds weird, but it can get very distracting when you're constantly chasing tang. I don't know, that there's really more of like a sense of intimacy, security, happiness, closeness with your partner. I wouldn't recommend trying to do like poly stuff. It's probably not for you, probably not for most people. Yeah. It's cool and fun while it lasts, but I think a lot of people think that they have to be open. I think that a lot of people think that they're the kind of person that's programmed for that, and it's more that you just haven't really learned how to be with a single person. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a fatherless child. Who really knows? So, yeah. Let's get going, though.
I think I'm seeing a trend here. Hey guys, what's up? It's imuRgency and welcome back to my channel. And today we're gonna be talking about polyamory, or throuples, and specifically why we're seeing so many throuples in Gen Z media. Because
it's just a new way to go, bro. It's weird.
I know that I can't be the only one that's noticed it recently. Like, we're seeing a lot of throuples, whether that be in shows like Gossip Girl.
I think if you just have one extra partner and they're like besties or something, it could work. No, not really. I mean, go for it, do your thing. I think that like it's a fantasy thing for people, and it just doesn't really work out the way that you want it to. Like, you're always going to have a primary and a secondary partner. Nobody's going to get treated equally, and it's not going to be satisfying for everybody. And it's a lot of work. Like, when I was dating multiple people, like, I tried to actually like treat them all with the same level of dignity and respect. It takes a significant amount of like energy to try to give people like that much attention. Most of the people who do this, where it's like guys that are messing with multiple girls, they're, for the most part, they're just like not caring about most of them or any of them, so it makes it easier for them. So it's like a fantasy. But if you're an actual person and you're not like a sociopath who cares about people, it's difficult to have these types of relationships.
The Degrassi reboot, Date Wing Saga, Elite, and we're just seeing a lot of throuples, and that really got me thinking as to why that is and what that could necessarily mean for representation of polyamory, as well as what the current landscape of the throuple means for society as a whole. Because as you know, representation in media is often a reflection of the real world, or reflects on the real world.
I think the only way I would say that maybe you could operate if you're not in like an actual relationship with another person, but you just like occasionally sleep with someone else. But even then, I feel like that's really difficult for most people to manage, because like jealousy will like set in. And in all honesty, like doing like a threesome or something could like really ruin your relationship with your partner, because they may not like listen, everybody has sex the same way for the most part. Like okay, so like I have a certain style, you have a certain style, everybody has a certain style, and I think especially if, having your partner watch you do the same things and act the same way to another person in that physically intimate space as you do with them is something that could like really hurt them, because they're like, wow, I thought I was special. And it's like, well, maybe some of the ways that you do it are special for sure, but ultimately like everybody has a style, and you're going to be enacting that style out to anybody, and it can just be it can be almost, I don't know if I go as far as say traumatic, but kind of.
Yeah, whatever. But before we do any of that, if you are new to the channel and like all things TV, pop culture,
If you want to just do it and get out of your system, do it. Go for it. It's just your relationship's probably not going to last. I'm just letting you know.
In fashion and commentary. Then make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. We are closely approaching 200K. So if you want to get here before 200K, then hit that subscribe button. You can also follow me on all my social medias at imuRgency. That's Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And while you're at it, if you haven't already, make sure to leave a like on this video because it helps out so much with the YouTube algorithm. But let's get into this. So like I said, we've been seeing an increase in throuples in TV and media, specifically in Gen Z media and with teen shows. And I think that's really interesting because at least in my TV viewing experience, or at least my consumption of media since I've been around, I haven't seen a whole lot of that prior, but I feel like in the past like 3-4 years, we've been seeing more non-monogamous relationships.
Did you know that Mr. Feeney was in a non-monogamous relationship with his wife? Mr. Feeney, I'm not even kidding. Look it up. He used to, they used to sleep around with different people. He actually slept with like an executive. I had a weird relationship or something with them. I actually heard his relationship with his wife. Isn't that crazy? You wouldn't thought Mr. Feeney. You know who I'm talking about from Boy Meets World. Okay.
Or at least consensual non-monogamous relationships. And I feel like we're gonna be using a lot of words here when we're talking about like the whole landscape of polyamory or like throuples in TV. So let's take a step back really quick and define some things and get a full scope of what's been going on historically and as of recently. First, let's
Mr. Feeney. How do you not know who Mr. Feeney is?
start by defining what polyamory is. According to Google, polyamory is the practice of engaging in multiple romantic and typically sexual relationships with the consent of all people involved. And this would fall under the category of a non-monogamous relationship, a relationship that's not just between two people. And non-monogamy, or just not being with one partner, has been a thing for pretty much ever. Like, it really doesn't take much to see non-monogamy in action in history. Like, literally just look at any of the sculptures or art from like the Mesopotamian era, the Romans, the Greek, like they were getting down. But as time has progressed, non-monogamy is
Mr. Feeney took his open marriage very seriously. I'm not kidding. You think I was kidding? Oh, you're not old. Boy Meets World is a fucking social phenomenon. Okay, you could just drop the act. Drop the act, nerd, okay?
On different forms and has evolved with time. Polyamory had a resurgence in the US in the 60s and 70s during the whole sexual revolution when everyone was being like really hippie and loose around gender roles, sexuality, and other social constructs. And fast forward to more recently, we're seeing a little bit more representation of polyamory as millennials and Gen Z make up larger portions of the adult population. In fact, I came with figures. In 2016, a study published by the Journal of Sex and Marital Therapy conducted a survey of nearly 9,000 single US adults. And that study showed that 1 in 5 people had previously been in a consensual non-monogamous relationship.
Yeah, well, sure.
Bring that up a little bit closer to the present.
It's not bad to experiment with it, but...
In 2020, Tinder did a study of over 3,400 Gen Z Tinder users. And in that study, about 1/5 participants said that they'd be open to exploring polyamory.
I mean, that's for like OkCupid. Of course they would be.
So it seems like in modern day, polyamory is definitely on the rise, especially within millennials and Gen Z. And at least anecdotally, I could say that I've seen a lot more consensual open relationships, especially within the queer community. With all that said, though, monogamy by and large does hold out as the norm for most people in relationships. But it's really interesting to see this rising representation of...
Yeah, I mean, just letting you know, like, do your thing, experiment. And I did as well, but it's just not, you're not going to feel fulfilled. That's just from personal experience. And I think that, like, it was good to get it out of my system. But like it becomes an additional stressor in your relationship to try to move past it because like it's tough to like it's tough to bring yourself to a place where you're fully committed to somebody again after like spending 10 years being in some form of an open relationship, and it's frustrating, you know, but it's worth the transition. But you know, I'm just saying, guys, word of warning.
Like throuples and polyamorous relationships. And getting into that, let's break into the current media landscape of throuples and how polyamory is represented in these shows. First up, let's talk about Gossip Girl. So in Gossip Girl, this latest season, season 2, we have a throuple between Aki, Audrey, and Max, 2 bisexual men and 1 straight woman. And looking at how their relationship formed, it initially started off as like this dirty secret. Like it was something that kind of just happened. And at first, at least Aki and Audrey felt kind of
Aki way. I like it the Aki way.
Ashamed about it. And there was a lot of struggle to get Aki and Audrey to not only accept the relationship themselves, but then to also be comfortable enough with coming out as a throuple, which led to a lot of turmoil with Max because he was more willing to just hop in and be out with this relationship. And at the time of this recording, the one main issue in their relationship that's a constant is communication. Like a lot of the time, 2 out of the 3 will make that one person feel kind of excluded and
yep, always.
Whatever situation they're in, whether or not that's actually the case. And coincidentally, the only time that they're actually shown to all be on the same page is in the bedroom. Most of the time, which is interesting to know. And if you've seen the new Gossip Girl, I'm sure you've seen this, but it seems like, at least in season 2, once all 3 of them became a throuple, that kind of was their personality. Like that is all of their character. Like the entirety of their character is to exist in this relationship.
Which sounds like a really weird like identity steal. I think that anybody who's makes their primary identity around like one aspect of their life is kind of cringe. Like if you're fat and like you are like everything about you is just, oh, I'm fat, like, you know what I mean? Or if you're LGBTQ, or if you're fucking like NASCAR or WWE, I'll give a pass to people who have Down syndrome, because like that's 50% of the WWE audience, but they do love it, and I can't blame them. I still watch WWE. I feel like there's too much talking now, though, and not enough wrestling. I miss the old days, but you know what? I'm an old man, so I miss the Stone Cold, Triple H, Attitude Era days. But hey, we can't go back. Should I get? I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna get this.
Before that, in season 1, I feel like their characters had a little bit more depth going on. They had a little bit more going for them. This season, the way that they're presented, it's like they are the three of them. But let's move on to the next show. We then could turn our eyes to the Throuple and Fate Wink saga. RIP, because I know it got canceled. But in that relationship, we have Ribbon, Beatrix, and Dane.
Dude, why are their names all so stupid?
Again, with the pairing of 2 guys and 1 girl. And this is interesting because they're all kind of characterized as like the evil trio, and each of them have their own thing against each of the protagonists of this show. Like, none of them are the heroes, if that makes sense. And the struggle in their relationship is that
WWE's US anime, actually, very based. Very based.
No one is really honest about what they want. Like, Dane clearly wants Ribbon more, and it kind of seems like there could be a reciprocation there, but I don't know if Ribbon is quite there yet. And that friction, along with like some other things with the plot, kind of caused their throuple to dissolve a bit. So all that we were really able to get from the relationship is that it was very angsty, and that they were not the good guys. And then we move on to Elite, and Elite is very interesting because it's not an American show. And there are multiple polyamorous relationships in the show. First off, you have the throuple between Carla, Polo, and Christian. One bisexual man, one guy whose sexuality was not really confirmed, and a straight woman. And how their relationship was played out was basically they brought in a third.
I'm going to assume that he's like bisexual in some capacity. Oh, but right, with like all non-binary and stuff, things are different. But pretty much bisexual.
Christian, because they wanted to spice up their relationship. Polo was feeling unfulfilled, so they added another man to the mix. First, they showed this as being a strictly sexual relationship, but then emotions were brought into it, and that's where things got a little tricky. Things fell apart really quickly due to
I don't know, man. It's so weird. Like, your relationship felt unfulfilled, so you brought in another person. I mean, I get it, but then at the same time, I'm just like, from my experience, because like I know people consider like, oh, maybe I want to do something like this. From my experience, like I feel the most. Why am I keep getting levels? This is pissing me off. I feel the most fulfilled now. Like, now that I'm closed off. Like, I don't feel like I used to feel like something was missing, but like giving myself 100% actually, weirdly, I don't even know why, but weirdly makes me feel like that's not the case anymore. I guess the commitment, like, and committing to it, like, mentally changes things. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting older too. I don't know. But, I'm just trying to talk about my experience with it, so that if you're somebody who like glorifies it, which I think happens, some people are glorifying it, you realize that it's not the amazing cool guy situation that people like to pretend it is.
Jealousy, and things got really messy because of it, and people just started tricking each other, manipulating each other. And these characters, once again, at least for Carla and especially Polo, they were not seen as the protagonists. In fact, Polo was very much an antagonist, at least in the later seasons. And then you have the other short-lived throuple of the show, Omar and
see, the bisexual guy was the antagonist, guys. See, I knew it. Bisexual men are evil. They're evil. I'm just kidding, guys.
And Patrick, and this is the first throuple on the list that's between 3 gay men. And like I said, it was very short-lived. The dynamic was more transactional, meaning it was just for some fun.
What about cisactional?
You get what I'm talking about. And again, this throuple kind of spurred as an attempt to keep Omar and Andrew's relationship afloat, because they were both kind of tempted to be with Patrick. And I guess the way that they saw fit, where it wouldn't be cheating or they wouldn't be hurting each other's feelings, is if they just let Patrick into the relationship and they both got to hook up with him. And now that I think about that and say that out loud, that's kind of messed up. But the reason this throuple broke up was because of, again, jealousy, where Patrick gets jealous of what Omar and Andrew have and the genuine love they have for each other, and he tries to get a piece of that himself by manipulating them to break up and strain their relationship. Then you have a show like Degrassi, which I personally haven't seen yet, the new one, where they have another.
Oh, I haven't either. I've seen the old Degrassi with Drake, not Drake Bell. No, the other Drake, not Drake Bell, the guy who likes to sleep with kids. Okay, Drake, or flirts with kids. Drake, the guy who flirts with Millie Bobby Brown. What's up with guys that named Drake? You know what I mean, dude? What's going on here?
The throuple between the characters Zig, Esme, and Frankie. And apparently
Zig, Esme, and Frankie. Frankie's the most normal name there. What's happened with all these bizarre names? Why is it everybody with the dumbest fucking name, like, in a poly relationship? I don't get it.
in that case, both Zig and Esme.
Yeah, Chingo, Bungus, and Myron. Wow, those are really interesting names. Like, what's happening here? That's the problem. Stop naming your kids weird shit. They end up fucking doing weird stuff as they get older.
We're in a relationship first. And then Esme brought in Frankie to help keep Zig and Esme's relationship afloat. Oh, and in this case, this throuple was between one guy and 2 girls. And cut to the chase, the reason why this relationship ended was because of jealousy. Are we seeing a theme here?
kidding.
And the last example that I have, I don't really know if I can count it as a throuple, but definitely was like a non-monogamous moment, was in Heartbreak High. And the little thing that Harper, Dusty, and Malachi had, and I'm not sure if I talked about this in my full Heartbreak High review. If you haven't seen that, you should go check that out. But that hookup, I don't know if I can say that it's completely consensual, because it kind of seemed a little predatory of Harper and Dustin. Because Malachi was, one, intoxicated, they all were, but he was also just reeling from the fact that he broke up with his girlfriend, was literally just brutalized by the police, and was in a very fragile mental state, and they kind of took that and ran with that and hooked up with him. And it seems like because of that, there was a lot of shame associated with their dynamic. You even see things like Malachi questioning his sexuality afterwards, as well as Dusty shaming and blaming Harper for having the little intimate relations, even though he was very much in on it as well. And since this is the one-time thing, I put this last in the list because it doesn't necessarily count as much, I feel like, in comparison to the others, but it's also important to note that Harper and Dustin were seen as the antagonists and villains in this story. Now, why did I run through all these? For one, we're talking about the rise of throuples in media, and those are the throuples in media. But two, because it's important and interesting to see the trends in representation of throuples in media. The main trend here in all these—
Well, I'll say one thing. It seems like the positive is that they're doing their best to accurately represent it in the way of explaining that like jealousy is a very real factor, and if you ever want to get through a non-monogamous relationship, you have to go against like your biological predisposition to get jealous, because it's going to happen regardless. And like it's just if you're somebody who could deal with it, that's fine, but I think that it's very difficult for humans to deal with jealousy in that way, and they want that intimacy, and they want it to be exclusive, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know?
Instances that they're pretty much all in high school. And that's a whole different discussion. I made a whole video talking about why Hollywood's so afraid to make a college show, or like a show that's not in high school, that talks about young people, but that is an important trend to note.
Well, that makes sense because they're trying to appeal to young people. So
also, it's interesting to note that the predominant layout—
that'd be like if the fucking Hunger Games wasn't about some like 16-year-old girl and it was about like a grown woman, people wouldn't watch it. You know, it's like this weird kid fantasy of wanting to be like the superhero or whatever, you know? You get what I'm saying? Not obviously not in this case. It would be like a superhero, but you get what my point is.
Of this throuple is between one girl and two guys. Usually one straight woman.
I prefer the throuples that are between two girls and a cup,
and two guys that are not straight, or at least are questioning their sexuality. What else do these have in common? Usually when it comes to the throuples we listed, a lot of them are antagonistic, or the throuples consist of antagonists all being together, or at least people that aren't friends with or supporting the protagonist. So you have Aki, Max, and Audrey, which if you've seen up to this point in Gossip Girl Season 2, spoilers, they aren't the best friends with Julian and Zoya, who are the protagonists of that show.
Sorry, I'm not mocking him. I'm being silly.
And Ribbon are quite literally the antagonists to the main cast that varies for a good portion of the series. Harper and Dusty are some of the antagonists of Heartbreak High, and then Carla and Polo, as we mentioned before. And the last and possibly biggest trend that I've seen in all these relationships is that they usually end or have conflict because of jealousy. Okay, yeah, cool. These shows all have similar vibes when it comes to displaying throuples. Why is it important? Well, it becomes really important when you kind of zoom out and look at how this affects the greater scope of media and society as a whole. If you've been here for a while, you've heard me say this.
Well, one, I would say that it kind of somewhat glorifies like I said, it's a good thing that they're not portraying it in this like disingenuous light. It seems like it's pretty accurate to like the way it actually is. But yeah, I think I don't know. I feel like it's just kind of whatever. I guess if the young people decide that they want to try out non-monogamy for a while, like be my guest, just understand that it comes with risks.
Many times before, but representation really does matter, because what you see on screen, if you have not seen it very much in your real life, is what you're going to think is just reality or the norm, which is why we say it's really important to have racial representation, queer representation, and the like, because for one, it gives these communities visibility, both to their own community as well as to other communities that may not interact with them on a daily basis.
Well, yeah, but what does it have to do with like the relationship working or not? Like, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that like black people would be any more successful at a throuple than a white people, you know what I mean?
So the way that these things are portrayed, and specifically for this video, throuples are portrayed, is really important because, as we mentioned before, although polyamory may be on the rise, it's not the norm. It's not the predominant way people have relationships. And especially since these relationships play out in shows that are geared towards teens and young adults, the way that throuples and non-monogamous relationships are presented hold weight in people's perceptions of them. So just based on the examples that I've seen, going off of nothing else, I'd be led to assume that throuples are these kind of taboo relationships that just don't work because of jealousy.
Yeah. That's actually 100% true. It's 100% correct. Again, you can make it work. It's just very difficult. It's not for most people. I think that anybody who I feel like anybody who's engaged in a poly relationship would probably say the same thing, even if theirs is more successful. They'll say it's not for most people. It's very difficult to get over that boundary. It is the taboo, and it will end because of jealousy. It's just and I don't know how to communicate to you how difficult it is, because I want you to think about it like this. Imagine, let's say you have a partner. Let's hope that you've had a partner, and like let's say you've been in love before, and that person that you were in love with, you shared a lot of experiences with. Like you would get together, You would hold hands in a way that just felt perfect. You would sit down and you would eat and you would look into each other's eyes. You'd confide in them in a particular way that made you feel safe. It made you feel secure. It made you feel like you're not alone. Every miniature interaction, from the big displays of affection to the small ones, where you wake up in the morning and like your partner comes up to you from behind and like rubs your back in the way that just feels good. You know, they know where your back pain is, and they just give you a nice massage while you're making them breakfast, and things like this. All these like minuscule, really detailed moments. Okay, those are yours. That's yours. Your partner gives that to you exclusively. Now imagine that person gave it to another person at the same time as you. It doesn't feel good. That is what non-monogamous relationships are. It is sharing those really special, intimate moments with somebody else, and it hurts. It is not like I feel like to an extent it's glorified in media, but it doesn't feel good. And it really is that simple. So like, yeah, it's not good. It sucks, man. It's brutal. It's rough.
Which just isn't true. But because that's just the way that they're predominantly represented, that's what
It's
someone
how
would be
it
led to
is.
believe. Or at least
It is
will be
true.
one of their first interactions with a polyamorous relationship. In my opinion, I think this is just an interesting case of giving something representation while also sort of disincentivizing the exploration of those relationships, if that makes sense.
Yeah, explore it all you want. It's just not going to work out. You're probably, if you're young and you like see my video, you're like, I can make it work. Go for it. You're not going to be able to. You're gonna it's gonna be like 5 years, and you're gonna be like, wow, this sucks. Like you're going to try to make it work. As like a rebellious kid that's like, I can make this work, you know, you're gonna like, that's the attitude you're gonna engage with it, and then after a while you're gonna be like, wow, I'm fucking miserable. I have to stop trying to make this work just so that I can prove somebody else wrong because I'm miserable as fuck.
Sense. Ultimately showing that by default, monogamy is more stable. When you consistently show non-monogamous relationships falling through because of jealousy or them not being
That's why
the
they
good
would fall
guys,
through.
you know? But again, that's not true because as we've seen with pretty much every show, then monogamous relationships be dramatic and unfaithful.
Yeah.
And I also think that there's something to be
Well, that's another problem too, is that like, so if you when it comes down to it, there is, okay, cheating is very simple when you're in a monogamous relationship, right? You can't do anything with anyone else. When it comes to polyamorous relationships, you'll set a particular boundary. So like cheating will become different. Like maybe it's your boundary that you can't sleep with another person in like your certain bed or in the house, or you can't fall in love with the other person, or you can't do this, that, and the other thing. It's very difficult to set those boundaries in like this more nuanced way, where you'd have to have a significant amount of trust. And then the other person, that just because they violate the rules doesn't mean that they don't like love the other person, but it gets complicated because like it's like, yeah, don't fall in love with somebody that you're engaging in sexually. It's kind of hard. Like there's like bonding hormones that are released for both men and women. It gets very difficult. These situations get really fucked. That's the problem with these types of relationships, is that they're like almost impossible to maintain where everybody's like happy and secure. It's just the truth.
said about the whole power dynamic in the representation of these throuples. In a lot of the cases where a relationship will become polyamorous, it's usually an act initiated.
Papa, I'm not poly at all, but it sounds like maybe you just tried being poly, but you aren't truly, so it didn't work for you. No, that is the truth. What I'm saying to you is that most people fall in where I'm at, where they think that they're poly, but they're really not. We have a generation of people who don't have friendships and they use sexual relationships as friendships with people. Instead of being friends and having robust, like strong friend relationships like people used to, now everything's very sexual. Most people are not polyamorous and don't have the ability or capacity to do so. They just think that they do. And I'm just warning people about it. I'm just letting you know. It's not an easy thing to do. So that's really what it comes down to.
By one partner to try and save.
You know? And by the way, what Hip said, in plenty of fulfilled marriages enjoy swinging, there is a profound difference from like a 20-year-old engaging in a non-monogamous relationship versus like 50-year-olds who've been married for a long time and have a significantly like different like a life experience. If you're 50 and start swinging or something, that like I get it. Like it's also a little different. And sure, there are swingers who can make it work. But I'm talking about the general amount of relationships. Like you guys can find outliers, but I'm saying generally speaking, these types of things don't work out. Okay, just to keep that in mind. And also, when people get older, like their relationships with sex will change. You know, that jealousy will go away in different ways. You know, you can't recreate a 40-year marriage or a 30-year marriage with somebody else. So going out and swinging isn't going to have the same impact as somebody who's like who's in their 20s or early 20s, trying to engage in relationships with like this other people in their 20s, trying to build relationships in an equal like footing. It's not the same. Like I said, there's always going to be like a primary partner. It's always going to happen, right? So there's a lot of like obvious nuance to this, but I'm just letting you know to be practical.
A relationship. And usually that character trying to save the relationship is the woman in the relationship, which is giving really interesting messaging about how these dynamics work, showing that if your relationship isn't working and you feel like you're about to lose your man, get another person there. But then you know it's not going to work out anyway because jealousy is going to happen, yada, yada, yada. It's also really interesting to note that for a lot of these relationships in the shows, when it's one girl and two guys, the common fear in these relationships that becomes like that communication issue is that the girl is afraid that the two guys are going to go off and be with each other. Like that's a whole episode in Gossip Girl, which can be kind of problematic because it's implying that out of the options, a bisexual guy is going to choose to be with a man over a woman, even though that y'all are in a polyamorous relationship where all three of you are meant to share the power, which kind of perpetuates some of the stereotypes about bisexuality in relationships. But you know, conversation for a different day, I guess. But this is all really important to consider when we're talking about how these relationships are portrayed in media. Now, I can already see some of y'all calling this a stretch, being like, Remy, you're really reaching here to make this seem problematic. And I'll admit, do I think that the direct intention of them including polyamorous relationships or throuples in these shows is meant to like dissuade people from doing that or just to give throuples a bad rap? No.
It's probably them having a personal experience with like an open relationship or whatever, and them communicating their experience with people through media. That's how a lot of like that kind of stuff will work. It's probably what it is.
I don't think that the genuine intention is to do that. I just think it's important to understand how
Oh yeah, my screen quality is going to be really low because I'm playing Vampire Survivors and I'm at the end of the game.
media can be interpreted by different people, especially when that media is of an underrepresented group.
I gotta learn how to dual stream because I have two like computers.
Or at least from a group or community that is not considered to be the norm. I guess that leads me to the last question of, is all this a good thing or a bad thing? And honestly, I can't say. I'm not one to say. Polyamorous relationships or throuples are real things for people. So as someone who's never been in a polyamorous relationship, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable being like, oh, this is good representation or bad representation. And I don't really think that that's the point of this video. But I did think that this was a good opportunity for both you and me to learn a little bit more about polyamory and break down how it's currently being portrayed in some of the most popular shows right now. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me for this video. Now I wanna hear from you. Have you been in a non-monogamous relationship before? Are you currently in one? And if you're not, would you consider being in one? If so, let me know down in the comments. What are your thoughts on the rise of the throuple in media? I'd love to hear from you. But thank you so much for watching. Again, if you're new, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Follow me on
It is gay and cringe. I like the video. All right. Cool. That was a good video. I'm happy you guys shared that with me.
I want Papa Gut to pee on my face, but just as a friend. There's nothing weird about that. I want him to pee on my face.